Raider Nation, welcome back to another edition of Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast covering your Las Vegas Raiders, also heard on the radio. If you're joining us in Vegas, thank you, on 101.5 KDON, and of course, the Bet HD2, both Odyssey stations. I am your host, Scott Gulbransen, along with my co-host, my partner here, Mr. Moton, Moses Sr., NFL writer over at Bleacher Report. You can catch his work up there. You can also catch several times a week. He's doing some great short video now for Bleacher Report. So get that Bleacher Report app and look for Mo's X posts when he tells you there's new stuff up there. By the way, follow him up there. Moton, Moemoton. I am at LV Gully, and the show is SNB Today. Plenty to get to today. Lots to talk about with camp rolling out. And of course, the Raiders getting set for their second preseason game against the San Francisco 49ers coming up this weekend. And Mo, we got roster moves, we got buzz from camp we're going to get into, some of those things. But I got to tell you, I've been kind of grumpy old man about it all week. People always overreact, a certain percentage. The overreaction to week one of the preseason in Raider Nation blew my mind.
No, it shouldn't, because we go through this every year where, regardless of what happens in the first preseason game, the Raiders are either going to go undefeated, shout out to my buddy Murph, or they're going to go winless, shout out to the negative Nancy's and Nate's out there. So I think it's just people chopping at the bit for the first game, even though it's an exhibition game. And once football rolls around, emotions get involved, and you know how that goes, guys.
Yes. And also, listen, everybody, it's a professional football team. It's a meritocracy. You have things to prove. I don't care what Pete Carroll's done in the past. He's got to prove he can win again. But even Pete Carroll keeping camp light, I like the personality Pete Carroll has brought to the Raiders. We saw him tackling by the legs, taking down Deuce Gruden the other day. If you didn't see that video, it was pretty funny. Stuff like that. And then there's people who don't like that either. Oh, see, after they played that crappy game. Listen, guys, just relax. I know. And don't come at me, Mo. I'm tired of people. You don't understand. It's been 30 years. Talk to a Browns fan. Listen, Raider Nation, don't be victims. You're not the only one that have a crappy franchise that you've had to cheer for all these years, right? Without the playoff wins, all the Chicago Bears. I mean, come on. There's a lot of people out there. You don't own bad decisions and bad teams over the last several decades. Things are going to get better. I think things are positive. As you said, Mo, after a little bit in your commentary after the first game, preseason game, which is like, look, yeah, there was some concerning things they got to work on, but overall, the trajectory, the momentum of this team, it's headed in the right direction. Is it anywhere near where it needs to be for this team to be a playoff contender? Not yet. Okay. But for those of us who believe they'll win 7 or 8 games, it's sort of like, yeah, I kind of expected this.
Yeah, the one thing I think that rubbed people the wrong way was the poor tackling.
Yes.
And I guess you would expect that from a Pete Carroll coach team, being a defensive-minded head coach. But I think the day after the game, he said that they hadn't tackled anybody.
They hadn't tackled in practice.
It was their first time tackling anybody. So, and it looked like it. And it took some time. The Raiders came back inside the game. I know the score is inconsequential here, but the fact that this is a team that already, showing, I don't want to say resilience in the exhibition game, but showing some resolve after coming out flat, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And just not saying, well, it's just an exhibition game. Let's just fold it up. We're going to get blown out. We're here in Seattle. Let's just go home. But, players are battling for jobs, job security, roster spots, depth chart spots, starting positions. You saw the competitive nature come out in the second half. Liked what I saw out of a lot of players that I know they're second and third stringers. They're going to be back in roster guys, but I liked what I saw out of a lot of those guys coming out of that game. So it wasn't all negative. There were some positives as well.
Yes, including Mr. Tom Brady, that part owner of the Raiders, his teacher's pet, Cam Miller. We'll talk about him in a minute. But I want to get through, too, Mo, a lot of news. Of course, this time of the year, you start to see the rosters and the movement that happens there, both comings and goings. The Raiders waived Kawan Baker, who was then claimed off waivers by the Green Bay Packers, of course, the wide receiver. He had previous practice experience with the Packers as well, too, so not a surprise there. Seth Williams was waived. Jonathan Sutherland's safety's waived. The Raiders also signed another familiar face, wide receiver Marquez Callaway. Of course, he was with the Saints and the Buccaneers, and that kind of corresponded with Quan Baker's waiver. Then safety, we haven't talked since this happened, Mo, but the Raiders brought in former Steelers first-rounder Terrell Edmunds. Not a surprise after the game, right? We saw, again, some of the issues that they had with defensive backs, and we knew that this was, and I still think there's cornerback moves to come, but you look at Terrell Edmunds, what's your take so far on that one, and are you surprised at the name versus the position need?
You remember Lonnie Johnson Jr. went down with a broken fibula, I believe it is, and Lonnie Johnson Jr. was a starting safety when Jeremy Chin moved into the slot. So in a way, this is a part-time starting position that they needed to fill. Thomas Harper also wasn't practicing a couple of days recently, so they needed a safety player at that position. Secondary, not surprised too much at the name. Terrell Edmunds is a former, I believe, first-round pick. I know he's bounced around the league a bit, but he can tackle. And if you know Pete Carroll defense, I know it didn't show up in the first half of that preseason game, but you got to be able to tackle. So Terrell Edmunds, made sense.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Also, trade rumors heating up. For those of you, by the way, make sure you subscribe to the show. We usually don't go this long before I remind people to do that. 6 minutes in. But please subscribe to the show wherever you get your audio. Just look for Silver and Black Today. Don't forget, rate and review. That helps us significantly. Put on your auto download, too. If you do it on your phone, if you're on the iPhone, for example, which the data tells us most of our viewers are, if you're on Android and you get your podcast through Spotify, just turn it on so that every time a new show comes, bam, it's right on your phone. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button, and also the notifications bell. But I say YouTube, too. That's what prompted me to remember to get people to subscribe. Was I've had comment after comment since the offseason about how Aidan O'Connell will be the future of the Raiders. And he will be the starting quarterback by, first it was he's going to beat out Geno Smith, as you said, Mo, before we were on the air. Then it was, no, well, by the fourth game, you're going to see Geno Smith's going to suck and he's going to take over. Then now, crickets. Because what we hear is Aidan O'Connell, again, trade rumors just circling around him. We saw that, of course, and we saw Cam Miller's performance. Again, only one preseason game. Can't get too excited about that, just like you can't get too upset about the team not performing as well as you want them to. But because of that, we continue to hear something that you talked about weeks ago, Mo, which was the Tennessee Titans looking for a backup quarterback. They don't really have a good option there. And so Aidan O'Connell would be a good backup quarterback there as well. Dave Ziegler, connect the dots, is with the Titans as well. He drafted O'Connell in 2023. Also, I know how people are going to feel, but there's starting to be a little buzz. I don't see it happening. Tyreek Hill, Raiders. Look, it's gone bad in Miami. And Miami's a train wreck waiting to happen, I believe. And so now we hear Tyreek Hill's name coming up. I'm not necessarily in favor of that, but just getting everybody caught up on the rumor stuff. Mo, what's your take on the O'Connell and the Hill deals?
First of all, the Hill deal makes no sense for the Raiders. Hill, he's already come out and said he doesn't want to play for quite some time. I think another 2 or 3 years, whatever the case is. He's been saying some bizarre things. I remember he said something about Devon Achane not being a third down running back. You don't want a guy criticizing a younger teammate like that. Just stay away from wide receivers who, can be bizarre. We've as Raider fans, we've gone through this before. Don't go down that road again. As far as Aidan O'Connell is concerned, I've been talking about this for months now, and people have pushed back on me and said, "Oh, we need Aidan O'Connell." I'm not trying to say Aidan O'Connell cannot be a good backup. I've been saying all along he's a backup quarterback. My point is, I don't think he's a good backup quarterback for this Raiders quarterback room. Geno Smith at 34 years old can use his legs. 833 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns over the last 3 years. Cam Miller, over 2,200 rushing yards, 48 touchdowns at North Dakota State, using his legs. Saw a little bit of that last week. So Aidan O'Connell, what does he not do well? Use his legs. He does not fit in this Raider quarterback room. I think he'll be traded within the next, 4 or 5 months.
And the other thing is, and again, I don't believe this will happen, but anything can happen depending on the deal. But we're also starting to hear And at first I dismissed it and continually dismissed it. And then we heard the beginning of camp, and that reassured me of this. But we're starting with the Aidan O'Connell conversation too. We're starting to hear more from more credible sources than before about Michael Mayer too. And I just don't see the Raiders doing that unless there's some sort of deal that knocks their socks off, Mo, because I think Michael Mayer with the two wide receivers, whether it's Thornton or whether it's Trey Tucker plus Jacoby Myers and then Brock Bowers, they have a potentially amazingly explosive receiver core counting those tight ends. So I just don't see it happening, but his name is coming up again in more substantive reports.
Yeah, and by the way, self-correction. It would be the next 2 to 3 months if a trade were to happen for Aidan O'Connell. The trade deadline in November. But I don't see Michael Mayer getting moved. I honestly believe Chip Kelly when he says that he'll use multiple tight ends. I brought the example, I believe, a month ago when I talked about Brent Selleck and Zach Ertz. Mm-hmm. Early in Zach Ertz's career, he played under Chip Kelly in Philadelphia. Brent Selleck was further along in his career. And it worked out for a few years with those two guys in Philadelphia playing tight end. So I do think with the inexperience at wide receiver, it's a benefit to have Michael Mayer, who was a young player himself, but because of the potential, his draft status coming out, some teams may have had him as a first-round pick. He was in the second round for the Raiders. But I think having him around and being around the Raiders and having that experience is a benefit to that offense.
Also, Mo, I think the importance here too with a second tight end, with the uncertainty with the offensive line, correct? I mean, you might need to. Michael Mayer, I would assume, as much as he can catch, he's a very good pass catcher if you go back to his Notre Dame days, is the fact that to have that other tight end in there if you're struggling. And we don't know that they will struggle on the offensive line. Obviously, they did in the first preseason game, but I think that gives his value. Now, they have other tight ends, too, on the roster, don't get me wrong. But a guy at that level, too, I think just gives him a little more, again, unless they just come at them with a trade they cannot say no to, I just don't see him moving because he's going to be too much of a part of that offense with Chip Kelly, as you mentioned. And we got to talk about Chip Kelly. Maybe we'll do that next time because there's a lot going on there. And I think that even though this offense wasn't always successful in that first Seahawks game, you saw a little hint of what's coming. Even though it was vanilla, there's a lot still there to see, and maybe we'll see a little more against San Francisco. All right, we're up against our first break already with all this news and conversation about the Raiders and training camp and whatnot. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're hearing from camp as far as who's doing really well, some standouts. It's always helpful to hear so that as they go into these preseason games, we can kind of look around and see who's doing well. And then also we'll talk a little bit about the 49ers game coming up. What do we need to see? What did we see last time against the Seahawks that you guys were also disgusted by? And what can they do to improve on that? Plus, in the third segment, we'll get to your phone calls. The Raider Nation Switchboard, of course, where we let you sound off. If you want to do that, 702-900-7869 is the number, 702-900-7869. All right, we're going to step aside. It's Mo, it's Scott, it's Silver and Black today. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back after this. Welcome back, everybody. It is segment number 2 here of Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast, also heard on the radio 101.5 KDON Las Vegas and the Bet HD2. Scott Gulbransen, Mo Moton back with you. We're talking Raiders football. We got you through the transactions. We got you through some of the news of the week, the trade rumors, of course, as we heard them. But Mo, what I want to get into now before we talk a little bit about the game coming up against the 49ers is what we're hearing out of camp. We're hearing a lot of performances, if you will, that are impressing people. Now, some of those we saw translate into the first preseason game, the tie against Seattle. Others we did not. But I want to start with one of the areas of big need for the Raiders, which is defensive back. We've been hearing a lot about Darnell Holmes in practice and that he's doing really well and shining. And of course, we continue to hear about Darien Porter. Those two guys really important, I think, for this rotation and for how this cornerback situation is going to end up. But from what we saw in the preseason game versus what we're hearing out of camp practice from our good friends on the ground covering it every day, how do you kind of reconcile that from what we saw in the game, Mo, to what we're hearing out of practice? Because I think a lot of people get excited about somebody like Darien Porter, and then they might see him in the game not do much. Now, opportunities are more limited because depending on playing time and who he's playing against. But talk people through that. Why should they still be excited about these guys? And how much can we trust hearing what's going on in practice versus what we see with our eyes in the game?
I will say this, covering the league for a decade or more, I hear coaches say this a lot, that they get a lot more, or should I say not a lot, they get more from practices than they do preseason games. Because in the practices, it's a controlled environment. You can test players in certain situations and scenarios, whereas the preseason, as you said, you kind of have to give certain guys opportunities, especially if they have an unsettled position, as Raiders do at cornerback. You have to get guys on the field to give them a shot to make a case for themselves. So it's a little different. And I would say don't dismiss the practice reports. But there's a caveat. Make sure you get your practice report notes from a good source. And I'll say that because there are some, I'm not going to name any names. You can connect these names to whoever you want, but there are some reporters who go out there and they have the lens of, I'm just going to only report the positive things. There are some reporters who go out there and they only report the negative things. Get your notes, your practice notes from reporters who give you both sides of the story, the negative and the positive. Okay, the offense was sloppy today. Geno Smith threw some interceptions. Okay, the defense was pretty good today. Tyree Wilson looked good, energetic, getting to the cornerback with simulated sacks. Just make sure you get balanced reporting, as you should do with everything. But I'll also say this. I think what we see in the game mostly lines up what we're hearing at practice. You're not hearing that Darien Porter is necessarily getting a bunch of interceptions, but he's holding his own and he's not allowing the big plays over the top. And I think for the Raiders and their pass defense, that was what I took away from their secondary. And for the most part, Isaiah Polamau, of course, had the interception. Of course, they gave us some plays. They made Horton of the Seahawks look pretty good at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, their outside cornerbacks didn't allow the big plays on the outside. And I still think the cornerback position is very much unsettled. You talked about Darien Porter, DeCameron Richardson coming along lately, breaking into the rotation and getting first-team reps. Eric Stokes has some veteran experience. Caillou Blue-Kelly on Tuesday had 3 interceptions at practice. He had a pretty good game against the Seattle Seahawks. Check out my guy, Matt Holder, the Bleacher Report scout. He did some cut-ups and showed some of Caillou Blue snaps on the outside on the perimeter because that's where he was lining up. But the position is still very much unsettled. They're gonna need the rest of these practices and these other 2 preseason games to figure out who's going to be starting on the boundary for week 1.
And we saw the depth chart for the San Francisco 49ers. You have 7 rookies on the 2-deep depth chart, including 3 first-teamers, of course, Ashton Genty, Dante Thornton, and the aforementioned Darien Porter. Also, Greedy Vance continuing. He's listed at 2nd there on the depth chart. But we heard out of practice from reliable sources that, including our buddy Vinny Bonsignore and Jesse Merrick, of course, with his new venture, that Greedy Vance continues to just get more comfortable. And that's what you want, right? You don't expect the guy to go out there. As much as we liked Greedy Vance, we've talked about him here several times, you want him to just start to get comfortable in that system. And by the time they hit the regular season, he's feeling good about where he's at. And I think that's it. You don't have to have these star-making players or, like you said, have to hear about 3 or 4 interceptions in a practice. You just want to hear that these guys are looking more comfortable in the position, in the system.
Right. And I know I've said I want to see more takeaways from the Raiders, but my point is that you're not going to always hear about a player having 3 or 4 interceptions, as Caillou Blue-Kelly did on Tuesday. What you want to know is that, can they match up with starting caliber talent?
Right.
You know, are they making the big mistakes? And if they are making mistakes, are they learning from those mistakes? And for the most part, Darien Porter hasn't looked lost among pros. As I said, I know Eric Stokes has the veteran experience. DeCameron Richardson coming along as a Pete Carroll type cornerback. But you want that competitive nature, and you want those guys to be able to push each other. I think they're doing that. The big test is going to come maybe, I would say, after the 49ers, because the 49ers have so many injuries at wide receiver. If you look at the 49ers injury, there's no injury report now, but if you look at the injury news in San Francisco right now, Brandon Ayuk is still recovering. Juwan Jennings has a calf injury or some type of leg injury. He was also in a contract situation. Ricky Pearsall has been nicked up for the past 2 off seasons. He's on and off the injury report all the time. They had another young wide receiver go down the other day. So I don't think the Raiders cornerbacks are going to get tested as they would during the season against the 49ers. So I wouldn't look for that in the preseason game. But if you're going up against second and third stringers, you want to see those young cornerbacks make some plays.
Right. And I think too, by the way, what's up with the California teams? I mean, the 49ers are the NFC version of the Chargers with injuries.
Yes.
I mean, the last 3-4 years, that 49ers team, just crazy. Same with obviously the LA team. But yeah, so absolutely. And there's so much to talk about. I can't get to it all, but I want to spend the rest of this segment, Mo, getting to what we saw, what we need to see. So for those of you who were really critical and upset about the first preseason game, performance, you had valid concerns. And I want to address some of those, starting with the observations that I had from my notes in watching the game, Mo. And that was, to me, going into this game, we talked about the lack of tackling, which we now know why. Partly that was because they hadn't done any of it. But the other thing that really just killed me, because I think it's self-inflicted, and if you do this in the regular season, you easily lose games you should not, and that is cleaning up sloppy play and penalties. We saw a lot of this. Now, you expect some of that in the preseason, right? Everybody's getting tuned up for the season, but Pete Carroll in his press conferences the last two times, the end of last week and this week, had talked about that, and they're not the young offensive line and the players that are involved on offense not getting the hard count, the cadence of the quarterbacks. Then you had execution issues. This cleaning up, I really want to see, even if they don't have remarkable performances, I want to see a clean game and a clean set of reps from all rounds of Raiders offenses and defenses.
10 penalties for 80 yards in that game against the Seattle Seahawks. I know it's just preseason. They're working out the kinks. I get it. But as you say, you got to play a lot cleaner of a game, whether your second stringers are out there, because let's be honest, the Raiders have a very top-heavy roster where it's not much quality depth there. And there's a good chance, a second or third stringer is going to be on the field come October. So those guys also have to play a clean game. So you can't dismiss that as saying, oh, it's just second, third stringers and backups of guys who are not going to be on a roster. No, the Raiders are going to have a lot of their backups play. One, because a lot of positions have rotations, and two, you can't expect to go through a season and not experience injuries. Happens to every team. As I said, the 49ers is happening to them now. The Raiders, it could happen for them in September. But those players have to be ready to play, especially at unsettled positions where you don't know exactly who's going to be the starter. So you're right, Scott. Want to see a cleaner game. Also want to see the Raiders come out a lot faster against the 49ers and have a good first half.
Yeah, what I want to see is exactly this, which is I want to see progress in execution, right? So this is the coordination. There's a lot of just sloppy, even route running, even execution and blocking, all that stuff. It's not the sexy stuff that comes out on a highlight reel, right? But when you watch what's happening on the inside, that offensive line, everybody was quick to jump on. See, Genti's not a generational talent after 5 carries.
Oh my goodness.
Forget him. You should just cut him. He sucks.
Oh my goodness.
People are nuts. But here's the thing. He had no blocking. The block up front was so messy. If you watch the film and you see how these guys were struggling in every possible way, no wonder he didn't run. Now, he's got to show his stuff too, but I'm just saying you got to be able to execute. The other thing too, we talked about the Aidan O'Connell trade rumors, and everybody loves the third string quarterback every year because it's usually a young guy, coming out of nowhere. Sorry, I'm doing my my Caddyshack reference. But Cam Miller, people already on the Cam Miller train because of one performance, fine. But you also need Aidan O'Connell to do well, because if Aidan O'Connell does get traded, you want that value to go up so the Raiders can get as much as they can in return. But that battle, who wins that battle out? You and I both believe it'll be Cam Miller eventually, but crazy things can happen. But so that's another thing I'm looking forward to. But you also, Mo, you did a video for Bleacher Report. I invite people to go get the Bleacher Report app and watch it, about 3 players too you talked about. And these are 3 names I think people should watch during this 49ers game too, because we've already seen some impressive performances in practice and last week from them. Talk a little bit about that so people have something to look forward in this meaningless game against San Francisco?
Meaningless. Quick synopsis. So 3 players that I think you should keep an eye on for the rest of training camp and the preseason. Cedric Jackson was one of them. Cedric Jackson is the grandnephew of Bo Jackson. So,
Yes.
Of course, he's a fast wide receiver, ran a 4.31. It was originally reported as a 4.25, officially went down as a 4.31 at Auburn's Pro Day before when he came into the NFL. But he had a good game against the Seahawks. 4 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown pass from, by the way, Cam Miller. And he's making some noise. And I think he could be wide receiver 5 if he can beat out Tommy Mellock. The other player I talked about earlier, Kyu Blu-Kelly at cornerback. Baltimore Ravens drafted him in the 5th round in 2023. Didn't really bounce around too much, but play in the slot, play on the outside, so he has inside-outside versatility. As I said, on Tuesday, 3 interceptions running with the first-team defense, so he's making a name for himself and moving up the depth chart. Third player is a fan favorite already, Laki Tassi, former rugby player.
Taki.
Yeah, 6'6", 273 pounds. And I think this is the Raiders taking a page out of the Eagles' personnel playbook. Jordan Mailata, former rugby player like Laki Tassi. It took him 2 years to crack the starting lineup, but now he's a solid left tackle. Laki Tassi, of course, played right guard against the Seattle Seahawks, so it's not a tackle, but the same idea. And you can take this mold of clay, this player who hadn't played football until recently, according to Pete Carroll, months ago, and turn him into a massive unit on the offensive line. He's only 21 years old, so it could take him some time. But keep an eye on Laki Tassi. He played in his first football game against the Seahawks and did pretty well. I like what I saw him early in that game while he was on the field.
Yeah, I mean, and I love it. So listen, I grew up in North San Diego County. I grew up around Samoans. Shout out to the Malafua family down in Oceanside. So tough athletes. And I think you're right. I think they're onto something. And of course, he grew up in Australia, as you said, playing rugby. My son plays rugby. I've grown to really love the sport. So there's a toughness there. And you're right. Developing that talent is a big deal. The last 2 things I want to talk about, Mo, with the couple minutes we have left is also I'm interested to see how these new additions fit in. We talked about Terrell Edmunds at safety. How's he going to do? Can we see him? These are some of the guys, when they sign veterans like this, I kind of want to see, I expect a little more out of them from the very beginning. Yes, they're new in a system, but I want to see them perform at a level that says, okay, that gives me some assurances that if they're going to step in for a starter who was injured, great, they can do it. Marquez Callaway, the same thing. The Raiders wide receiver, we have all these young guys. We talked about, you talked about Tommy Mellott, all these guys that are there, but you want to see, you like to have that veteran for depth. So can Marquez Callaway come in and make an impression right away too? Those are 2 guys I'm going to watch as well.
I want to see the starters play more. Covering the league, right? The first week of the preseason, there are multiple teams that made a point to play their stars a little more than they've done in the past because they've had slow starts to the season. Team that you're very close to, the Bengals, are one of those teams. They play the Eagles. I believe Joe Burrow and the crew got 2 drives because they've had some slow starts in the last 2 years. If you remember, the Bengals lost to the Patriots in week 1, 16-10. They started 1-3 the year before that, and they said, we don't want to start the season slow this year. We're going to play our starters an extra drive. And I want to see the Raiders starters a little more because Geno Smith got a drive. We didn't really get to see Ashton Jeanty get going behind that offensive line. Get those guys warmed up so that they're ready to go in week 1.
Yeah, I'd like to see them play a full half, at least a full quarter, meaning at least 2 or 3 offensive drives if the defense can hold up well. That's what I'd really like to see. So we'll see. All right, we're going to step aside for our final break here on Silver and Black today. When we come back, we're getting to you. We're getting to your phone calls on the Raider Nation switchboard. It's Mr. Moton. It's Mr. Gulbransen. Class is in session, Raider Nation. It's Silver and Black today. We're coming back right after these words. Welcome back. Home stretch here, everyone. Final segment of this edition of Silver and Black today, an Aussie Sports Original Podcast, also heard on the radio, 101.5 KDON, and The Bet in Las Vegas on HD2. Mo Moton, senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report. Scott Gulbransen, we are your guides. We're going to get right to your calls, Mo. As you can imagine, people got a lot to say after last week and into the moves. Dare I say, though, people are staying positive, which is a good thing. No reason to panic yet. Sorry. Raider fans. I'm just playing with your emotions there. All right. We're going to go right out to our guy, AJ DeMello, our resident in-house professional working comedian. AJ's down in Austin, Texas now, which is a comedy hotbed. If you listen to Kill Tony and any of those great podcasts, you know this. AJ, by the way, Mo, AJ, there's a couple people who've dropped out of our fantasy football league, which we might do a couple. But AJ's now in the league, so that should be funny. He should have some good trash talk, I would imagine. He's a comedian, right? I might even hit him up to get some Kelly jokes. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, we're going out to Austin now to our buddy AJ DeMello. Here he is.
Yo, guys, it's AJ DeMello in Austin, Texas. How you doing, huh? Hey, loving the vibes around the team, but no one's brought up like his chip. Maybe I missed the question, and maybe it's stupid to even ask. Of course, they're working on it, but has Chip been working with Geno on the red zone accuracy? He had also the second most batted balls last year, and no one's really brought up the scars of Geno consistently. You know, just kind of a praise fest, which I get, but I decided to put on my my couch GM cap, which is very serious, and I got humbled very quickly. I started to type into Google, did Geno take too many sacks? And Google was like, actually, he's good at avoiding sacks. And I was like, well, this is what I get for thinking I know a lot. But anyways, I'm interested to see if that's a thing for Geno going forward, if he improves on that. And a lot of people are running away with wins here. I think 8 wins max, unless Michael Mayer and one of the rookie receivers have a better year than we hope for. And one of the backup running backs has to be consistent and available. And defense, I think one of the defensive tackles has to step up. Kuhn's got to return to form. And that leap of faith we're taking at linebacker and defensive backs got to pay off. I mean, after Christian Wilkins left, the depth makes me think of a 3/4 of the way played game at Jenga, just wobbly, like a lot of holes to fill. Still need another draft. The biggest wild card, I think, is Trey Tucker. Like who is that guy? Is he a guy? Is he just a guy? And here's a move for Raiders and your friends. If your Raiders friend has one too many drinks and tries to start a fight with anyone, just kiss their forehead, because there's no HR in the black hole. All right, let's have fun. I hope the Raiders are going to have fun this year. Looks like they actually are going to have fun, And I'd like to see Josh McDaniels' face on the sideline, hopefully because we're winning and not losing, because that guy's probably going to pull a hamstring like jumping like a little kid, like, oh, I got one. You know how Josh is. He gets overexcited over things that don't really matter. Anyways, I don't know where that's coming from. So, looking forward to that fantasy league too, by the way, guys. And, go Raiders. And Pete Carroll, put on something, wear some black, like we get that you're like maybe our savior from the heavens, but it's okay to put on, black.
All right, there's AJ DeMello with fashion advice for Pete Carroll. Although I gotta remind you, AJ, what does Mark Davis wear? White. What did Al Davis wear? Now, Al Davis wore black too, don't get me wrong, but Al Davis wore all white a lot.
Yeah.
So it kind of fits in, but I hear you. And noted, Mr. DeMello. A couple things there, Mo. Number one, Geno Smith. No one here, I know, and no one overall has ever said that Geno Smith's a top 5 quarterback. Is he a top 10 quarterback? Absolutely. Does he have issues? Yes, we've talked about it here many times. Mr. Moton, you've talked about his interception. He goes in streaks where he throws picks.
Very streaky.
And AJ was talking about batted balls. Now, remember, by every measure, I don't care if you hate PFF or whoever you read, our lads, whoever, the Seattle Seahawks last year had one of, if not the worst offensive line in the NFL. Okay? So they were really bad. So factor that in a little bit. Now, you go back 3 years, if the batted balls thing is an issue, I don't know. It's a good question. But no one, I don't think, just because you have a confident quarterback who's a winning quarterback overall, and I say winning not as in championships, but record-wise, people feel better about that, Mo. I think that's where the positivity is. Nobody's crowning this guy Tom Brady the second coming. I mean, nothing like that.
I think what AJ DeMello is hearing a lot is off-season talk where the commentary goes one way or another. Remember what I talked about, Scott?
Yes.
When you take practice reports, get balanced practice reports, not just a positive, not just a negative. Usually, when a player is added, it's either all negative or all positive.
Right.
You very rarely hear the balance. And I have mentioned the streakiness that Geno Smith has experienced in his years as a starter. And as I said, sometimes he can trust his arm a little too much, and you'd rather him not throw certain passes downfield. But if you do that, you take away the vertical game, so you want him to be himself. The batted balls issue, part of that offensive line, you mentioned it. He took 50 sacks last year, by the way, behind a bad offensive line. He took 31 sacks in Pete Carroll's last year in Seattle. So a lot of this has to do with coach staff, development of players. I do have my concerns about Brandon Carroll, so I have some concerns about the offensive line. It's still a bit unsettled. We'll see how that gels, but they have to get that front five together. We've been hearing a lot about Jackson Powers-Johnson being moved around for a second team. Is he going to start? People worry about he's going to get traded. I want to see what this Raiders offensive line looks like before I start to gauge how many sacks Geno Smith could take. As far as Trey Tucker, really quick, Scott, if you ask Geno Smith, he says Trey Tucker reminds him a lot of Santana Moss. Take that for what you will.
Yeah, and I had Trey Tucker on my early training camp list of possible surprise cuts. Now he's balled out.
I had him on my list of trade candidates, not cuts.
Trade, yeah. So I think we were all there because he had something to prove, and so far, what we hear, what we see, is he's proven it, which is great for the Raiders and obviously great for him. So good deal, AJ. Thanks for the call. All right, now we're going out to Armando in the Beehive State in Salt Lake City.
Gentlemen, this is Armando from Salt Lake calling the morning after the first preseason game against the Seahawks. Wanted to give a few thoughts, and as always, love to hear your thoughts as well. First, the negatives. Let's get those out of the way. The things that jumped out to me on either side of the ball, the offensive side, the offensive line was not promising at all. I know that the play calling is going to be a little bit more vanilla in the preseason. You don't want to really show your hand this early, but the pass blocking, the run blocking should be better. That's something that is going to need to improve, and it can end up being the death, the nail in our coffin if we don't clean that up. That's on one side of the ball. On the other, the run defense. And we know that that is an issue with Patrick Graham's defenses historically over the years. The discipline of staying in your lanes, guys. Like, this is stuff that you learn in Pee Wee football. This is stuff that I learned, and they're not able to do it. And hopefully this is the first live action that, that they have a chance to be able to live tackle. And so you gotta get a little bit of the rust off. But that's something that's concerning, and that also needs to change. The one big positive that I saw, maybe not the biggest positive, but the one that I really wanted to talk about was Jamal Adams. He was all over the field when he was on defense and playing, but more so than that, his energy on the sidelines, guys. We need a leader like that. We need a player like that, lifting up all the young guys. He was so invested in the game. When the booth was interviewing him down on the field, he was looking up, and he's just you could tell his passion for football, and we need players like that. And it was really exciting to see. So makes it really easy to root for a player like that when you show up like that. So those are my thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts on that and on everything else around the game. And we'll see what next preseason game brings. Take care, both of you. Much love, and talk to you soon.
All right, Armando, good call. Thank you for that. Mo, offensive line, a couple things here. It's hard to argue with what he said. Yes, there was trouble there. But I also remember you talked about it very consistently, and we don't sugarcoat things here on Silver and Black today. The Brendan Carroll situation, he's got to prove it, man. He's got to prove that he can develop that line and get it cohesive. That's on him as the coach. It's on the players too, of course. Then you have Jackson Powers-Johnson moving to guard again. People are freaking out about that. I don't understand why. Like, apparently fans sitting in the stands know better about where an offensive lineman should play because he did well at center. We understand that. But clearly Pete Carroll, Brendan Carroll, the staff with the Raiders feels that they need to tinker a little bit, that they might have something better by moving him. What are you making of that whole offensive line outside of the Brendan Carroll thing, which is obviously a big one, but what we saw last Saturday and what the Raiders need to do in the interim to get it right?
So the offensive line has been one of my, I don't want to say concerns, but units to really watch this offseason, simply because Brendan Carroll coming in as a primary offensive line coach doesn't have much experience there. He was an assistant offensive line coach in Seattle. Of course, he coached offensive lines in college, but not in the pros. So that was my concern there, was Brendan Carroll and how he can develop those young offensive linemen. I'm not too worried about Jackson Powers-Johnson as long as he starts. I know a lot of fans have an issue with him not being the starting center because that was the expectation for the 2023 Remington Award winner. I understand that. But different offensive line coaches and offensive coordinators have different ideas or visions for what players' roles will be. And let's not forget, Jackson Powers-Johnson also played well at guard last year.
Yeah.
He played both guard positions, I believe, and center. So it wasn't like he was a bad guard and a good center. He played well at both positions. So if they want to play him at guard, I'm fine with that, assuming that the idea is Kappa gets benched and Jordan Meredith gets on the field, and Jordan Meredith is a good center. Now, if Jordan Meredith, he's horrible at center, then it's a bad idea. You move Jackson Powers-Johnson back to center. But if Jackson Powers-Johnson is a good guard, he proved to be that as a rookie, and Jordan Meredith can hold his own at center, you're trying to get your best five on the field. Right. So you're saying we take Alex Kappa off the field, out of the starting lineup, and we put in Jordan Meredith, who's a good center, hopefully. I'm fine with that. But I'm going to say this is a big but here. There has to be development. Jackson Powers-Johnson, while fans love him, I love him, he is only a second-year player. DJ Glaze is only a second-year player. Dylan Parham is in a contract year, but he's been basically an average guard if he is going to start. So there has to be some development progress along, and it has to come from the coaching staff.
And a reminder, JPJ, fans love him because he's a gregarious guy. He's funny. He's got that big personality. What's not to like? I mean, I get it. But you're right. He wasn't an all-pro. I mean, this wasn't like he was an all-pro best center in the NFL. So let's pump the brakes a little bit about that, and we have to just trust in the training camp and the coaching staff to see. All right, we're gonna get one more call, or I should say, no, we got a call coming in. I want to say one call, an important call here. This is from our buddy Murph, Raiders Fan Radio. Here he is.
What's up, fellas? Hello, Moton. Hello, Scott Gulbransen. This is a six-time caller, long-time listener, your old buddy Murph. Hey, so today in Raiders fan pearl clutching, Chiefs practice, hanging out with one of his mentors, Steve Spagnuolo, wearing Chiefs gear. And half of Raider Twitter is freaking out. Well, because that's what they do, right? You're going to freak out or about one thing or freak out about another. But it's fascinating to me that fans have an expectation that players and coaches have a certain loyalty that is going to emulate or mirror what ours is as fans. As fans, that's our job to be loyal. As players and coaches, it's their job to play and coach football. That's it. They don't have loyalty to teams. They may like where they're at. I'm pretty sure Max Crosby loves being a Raider, but that doesn't mean that if he doesn't play for the Raiders, he won't love playing somewhere else. I love my job. I love my company. But if I got fired, I'd go work for my competitor tomorrow. Like the idea that we have this expectation that these guys are doing their jobs and they're getting paid for doing these jobs they love. The expectation is that they wouldn't continue to do it when unceremoniously dismissed from whatever team they were with. It's a fascinating thing to me as an outside looker at this thing that fans would have that expectation. So anyway, just running that by you guys. Just wanted to see what you thought. I know Mo was going after people today like crazy on there. You're cracking me up, and Mo, you're the best. But you're both the best. I love you guys. Talk soon.
There we go. That's an applause-worthy call right there. Yes. Because I don't get it either. Do you remember where Marcus Allen finished his career, Raiders fans? What uniform did he wear? Okay, so I don't get it either because listen, it's a business. When Antonio Pierce was shoving up your backside, all the Raiders chants, all that stuff, you ate it up. But then he got fired. What do you expect him to do? Go out and scream Raiders and wear Raider gear now? I mean, look, I agreed with him getting fired, but I wouldn't expect that of him. But it's fandom. I get it. So to Murph's point, I agree with Murph, but I also understand the emotion of seeing your former coach that you might be disappointed in. If it comes from a point of disappointment, I get it. But it is an interesting part of fandom, Mo.
From a fan perspective, I get the point that Antonio Pierce grew up a Raider fan, right? So he talks about growing up a Raider fan, hating red and all of that stuff. And then I think what rubbed fans the wrong way is the fact he was wearing Chiefs gear. So I'll say this because we're going to sound like three old men telling kids to get off our lawn here. But he won a Super Bowl under Steve Spagnuolo in New York. I know I watched it here, right? Steve Spagnuolo is probably someone he looks up to as a mentor. Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league right now. If you're Antonio Pierce and you just got fired from your dream job and you're trying to get back into the league and be a coach, why not learn under one of your mentors who you won a Super Bowl under? And a lot of people say, well, he didn't have to wear the Chiefs gear. He's not technically employed by them. Look, he's in Kansas City territory. He's going to wear the gear. That's just how it works out. And yes, Scott, when he was a coach, he said all the right things. He said all the things that you wanted to hear. All the things you heard him say as a coach is things that he wanted you to hear. But now that he's not employed by the Raiders, he doesn't have to live by any of those words. He is a free agent, and he can do it as he pleases. It's his career.
Well said. Okay, there you go. So Murph is right there. I'll do the radio end at the end. But so there you go, Murph. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll get some people who feel strongly on both sides of that. But I always go back to personal things. Like if you work for a company, as Murph said, listen, Antonio Pierce wants to coach again, I am sure. So does he say, well, no, I hate the whole AFC West, so I'll never work for... No! You need a job, man. You need a job. So if you need a job, hey, I'll put on whatever clothes I need to put on to take care of me and my family. If you don't like it, you don't like it. That's the way it goes. But anyway, we move on. All right, now we're going to get out. We got other callers, of course. And again, if you want to be part of the show, you can call in 702-900-7869, 702-900-7869 for the Raider Nation switchboard. We go out to our buddy Gen X Raider. Here he is.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Mo. This is Gen X Raider from Massachusetts. I'll try to keep it short and sweet this week as I got cut off last time. Cornerback question, Mo. You were advocating for Mike Hilton, but not sure that he fits Pete Carroll's physical profile for defensive backs. He's like 5'9" or 5'10" or something. Also read somewhere that Jamel Dean from Tampa Bay Bucks might have been a possibility, maybe in a trade. Given the giant John Spytek connections. I'm not sure what happened there, but any other cornerbacks that are out there for the Raiders to target? Just wondering about that. Last night, preseason game last night, I stayed up to watch the whole game. Call me crazy, but being in the Eastern time zone. But yeah, I was starved for some football. I liked how resilient the team was. There were some good plays from Cam Miller, some good plays from cornerback Caillou Blue Kelly. Maybe he sees some more time now that Jacorian Bennett is no longer there. Great play by Polamalu on the interception. Great play by newcomer Thomas Booker. Great stop on Jalen Milroe from running up the middle. I think it was in the fourth quarter. Dylan Lobby had an impressive game. I was pretty stoked to see that. But the first half was overall pretty lackluster on both sides. The offensive line is starting to concern me a little bit. Have to keep an eye on them. They didn't play that well against Seattle second stringers, I guess they were. And defensively, the Raiders, I don't think, could really stop the run. They struggled there. Lastly, just wanted to mention, I will be visiting Vegas soon and attending my first Raiders game ever.
All right.
I'll be at the Bears game on week 4 at Allegiant, so very excited. And actually, it'll be my first ever NFL game, believe it or not.
Wow.
Hell, I don't know how that worked out, but been to a bunch of baseball games, but just didn't work out for NFL games. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.
There you go, Gen X Raider. Good call, and congratulations on going to your first NFL and first Raiders game. If you hadn't been to an NFL game, you had to first go to a Raiders game, right? Because you're a Raiders fan. So at least you got that right. I've never been to a WWE wrestling match. I don't ever plan to go to one either, but just so you know, you're not the only one who hasn't been to something. I'm saying that to Mo because he's a big wrestling guy. Mo, I'll let you take that one on Gen X Raiders' point early on in the call there about the offensive line, and defense was slow, man. Could not cut the edges there.
First of all, WWE events are fun to go to. Second of all, I'll say this, and people now starting to warm up to the offensive line being a bit of a concern, and I'm glad people are starting to see what we've been talking about, and that's if your offensive line is unsettled and you have an unproven starter at right tackle in DJ Glaze who gave up 51 pressures last year. You're moving around JPJ. Dylan Parham's in a contract year. He's been an average, okay, decent guard. You're going to have some question marks. It's fair to ask some questions there. And I want to see how this offensive line is going to fare as time goes on, because they got to obviously build some chemistry and gel. I get all of that stuff. But that's why you want to have the same 5 guys on as much as you can so those guys can build that chemistry and rapport. He also talked about the cornerback position. I will say one thing about Pete Carroll and his defensive backs. While he loves long cornerbacks, and that's probably part of the reason why they traded Jacory Bennett, he's also willing to be flexible with measurables with his slot guys. His slot guys haven't all been 6 foot or taller. I had a tweet Moton on X where he had a bunch of guys playing a slot that were under 6 foot, some of them 5'9". Igbu Amadi is one of those guys. He's 5'9", 184 pounds. Mike Hilton, by the way, is already signed with the Miami Dolphins, so he's no longer available. But if you're looking at cornerbacks for the Raiders, I don't think they're going to sign one at this point. But if you're considering them, Rasul Douglas still available, Kendall Fuller still available.
There you go. The waiver wire wonder kid Moton. There you go. All right. Now we move on to Tommy. Here's Tommy.
Scott, Mo, this is Tommy from North Carolina. Love the show. Very excited for this Raiders season. I don't have a ton of expectations. I think for me an 8-9 record is pretty doable. My biggest thing is I just want to see this team compete. I just want to see this team, deliver on things that they were weak at last year, establishing a good run game, being effective in the red zone. Offensively, defensively, they were still middle of the pack, top 15. I'll take it. I think this year you're going to see the Raiders be underrated, and I think that's just offensively. I think there's a lot of pieces in place that maybe flying under the radar. I think Dante Thornton, he's going to be a huge part of this offense. I'm excited to see what Michael Mayer can do. Just kind of want to hear your thoughts. What do you think this team can be like offensively, and do you think this team offensively is kind of underrated and might surprise some people this year? Very much excited for Chip Kelly and Geno Smith and what they can do with this group, and just excited for a good year for Raider Nation. I think there's a reason to be optimistic, just knowing that they'll compete. And just knowing that they'll actually, do somewhat well this year. I think this is a good era of football we're in, and I'm excited as a Raider fan. So hope you guys are doing good. Football's right around the corner, so go Raiders. Let's go.
All right, there you go. Tar Heel Tommy. You just earned the nickname. You're
Tar Heel Tommy.
Doesn't mean he's a Tar Heels fan. He might be, but I don't know. He's just Tar Heel Tommy. Tommy, good call, man. And listen, I don't think they're underrated. I think they're unproven. There's a difference, right? Because I think unproven, we've been talking this whole show about the offensive line. If you don't get that shored up, you're not going to get the ball out. You're not going to run the ball. You're not going to do anything. So the offense then could falter. But yes, it has an incredible potential. The other thing, Mo, too, I won't get your comments on both of it, is the defense has a lot to prove as well. Everybody's just, okay, so even if the offense was underrated, you could score 30 points a game and be losing because your defense can't shut people down. And there's a question, again, defensive backfield at line. We saw how slow they were at linebacker against the Seahawks. Now, you have Jamal Adams hopefully going to do something there and maybe step it up a little bit. But there's a lot of questions here, which is why I think the 8 wins is a very good expectation.
So we got touchdown Tommy Mella on the Raiders. We got Tar Heel Tommy calling into Silverback today.
You got it.
But no, I get what Tommy's trying to say about underrating the offense because there are so many young parts there. Jack Best, Dante Thornton, Ashley Genti, all rookies. And we talked about the offensive line being relatively young. But you said it, Scott. This is why the Raiders are projected to win 7-8 games because the two key positions on both sides of the ball. Young wide receiver core, unproven players in key positions. Defensively, what is their secondary really going to look like? A lot of young players in the secondary. So they have to prove it on the field. I do agree with Tommy when he says the offense could be a lot better than people think. I would say the ceiling for the offense is top 12 in scoring. And I'm not kidding when I say that because you got Brock Bowers there already. Michael Mayer, I think, is going to be there. I don't think he gets traded. Ashley Genti, though people were making fun of his stat line from an exhibition game behind an offensive line that still needs to gel, he's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him. And then they upgraded massively at quarterback. But I do think the ceiling for this offense is top 12, assuming their players stay relatively healthy. Now, Brock Bowers unfortunately goes down, or Geno Smith or Ashley Genti, not going to look so great. But if those guys are on the field for most of the games, this offense should be able to put up points. Now, can their defense keep the opposing team's offense on the field so they can win football games? We'll see.
That's the key. All right. We got a couple minutes left, so let's squeeze in this call from Tarek. Here's Tarek in Chicago.
Hey, what's going on, Scott and Mo? This is Terrell checking in with you guys from Chicago. I just want to talk the preseason game from last night. I was a little surprised. I was surprised and kind of disappointed. I'm trying to keep things in perspective and not kind of dig too deep into it, but I was a little surprised. I expected to see a lot more discipline on both sides of the ball. I expected to see some more crisp execution. I did not expect to see sloppy play like I did, especially in that first quarter. This first quarter was just absolutely terrible. I did listen to Pete Carroll's press conference, and he did say that they kept the playbook really, really vanilla. I was also surprised to see JPJ playing well into the second half, but the offensive line looked really, really bad. The run defense was horrible. AOC, I'm just don't have a lot of hopes for him, but at the same time, I think he did some decent things in the second half, but looks like he's going to be our backup quarterback heading into the season. I will be surprised if it's Cam Miller. And what's really concerning is Seattle really didn't play. I don't believe they played any of their number ones. So I expect to see substantial improvement. I know in 6 days we scrimmage against the 49ers, and then we host them in 8 days in Vegas for week 2 preseason. Hopefully hopefully the ones get a little bit more action. I'd say at least give them a full quarter, if not maybe into the second quarter, because you definitely want to see some improvement considering some of the deficiencies and some of the woes you saw. I wanted to get your just a random question. Do you guys prefer that Chip Kelly and Patrick Graham are on the sidelines or up in the booth? I just wanted to pick your brain about that. You guys have a great weekend, and I'm looking forward to your first show post preseason 1 game, and I will talk to you guys later. Go Raiders. Bye-bye.
Interesting question. Now, Chip Kelly last year winning the Ohio State's national championship was in the booth. I don't know if he's going to be on the field. I've seen him on the field. I don't know. I think it goes back to head coach more so, Mo. Haven't you been – some head coaches like it, and then they mix it up if things aren't going well? It's a really good question. I don't know usually what goes into that. If you know, please inform us.
I've heard some coaches say they like to be in the booth because they can see more of what's going on in the field versus when you're at ground level. You kind of when you have a bird's eye view, you can kind of see things a lot better and how they're developing as the game goes on. I would just lean on the coaches for that one and say, like, where do you feel comfortable? Like, what is your perspective on this, and let them roll with it. But if you're asking me, I'd rather have my coaches on the field because the player interaction. If you have a quarterback, and I know they have headsets and communication and all that stuff, so they can communicate that way. But I want my coaches to be on the field to get a real, like, actual feel for the game in the moment on the field. That's just me personally.
Yeah. There's like you said, there's points to both styles and ways of doing it. So we'll see what the Raiders do. I don't know what Chip Kelly's going to do. I mean, again, last year he was up in the booth and they won a national championship. That was a college game, different head coach, and we'll see what Pete Carroll likes him to do. And I know Patrick Graham's done it both ways. So, and where that came from, I don't know if that was his choice or if it was the head coaches at the time. So we'll see. But Tarek, thanks for the phone call. All right. Thanks to all the callers for calling in. We've come to the end of our journey together so far this week. By the way, we're going to, for those of you watching us or listening to us on the podcast feed, we will have a special pregame show against the 49ers. I'm going to be hooking up with Murph from Raider Fan Radio from the Raider Dad Tailgate. Mo, if you can join us, you can join us. If you can't, that's okay. I'm telling Mo for the first time as we're recording this, so he has no idea what I'm talking about until now. But we're going to do that. We're going to check in with Josh Camite, who is going to be there with the kids and everything. So we'll get a bird's eye view from Murph on the ground, as well as Swag Jeff will be there as well. So we'll get a little bit of that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the game before the game. And then, of course, we'll be back next week to talk through the game. We're just a couple weeks away from us going to our season schedule, so you'll have multiple shows per week coming up, but we got a couple more weeks before that happens, but we'll get you all up to date. Mo, let everybody know what you're up to the rest of the week so they can keep track of your work up on Bleacher Report.
Over on sportsnet.com, just went up. Raiders that need to have a better week 2 of their preseason because they either didn't show up in week 1 or they're battling for position and falling behind. As Scott said early in the show, look out for my Bleacher Report shorts where I pick a topic and talk about it for about 2 to 3 minutes. This week, it was about Raiders that are under the radar. I mentioned them: Cedric Jackson, Kyle Blue Kelly, and Laki Tassi.
There you go. So much to be ready for. All right. That's going to do it for this show. I want to thank our producer at Odyssey, Mr. Mike Rabier. Give him a special tip as he's helping us get ready for another big season here. Going into our 8th season, 9th year of covering the Raiders on Silver and Black today. So we're excited for that. Also, our producer on the radio, Mr. Mark Bonilla, longtime friend, responsible for getting this show on the radio back in 2018. So thanks to him as well. Thanks to my partner, Mo Moton. And thank you, all of you, for joining us and being part of the show. Whether you love us or hate us, we just hope you listen or watch. So thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. We will see you guys next week. We'll talk about this 49er game and where the Raiders are roster-wise. For everybody here at Silver and Black today, thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. All right.